Hi, my name is Deanne Barr, and I'm the author of such psychological thrillers as Expired Listings, Slashing Mona Lisa, and the upcoming Saving Grace, which is now on pre-order. So if you have interest in a great domestic suspense, pick it up early. I'm going to be speaking today with Marilyn Levinson. She is the former founder and president of the Long Island chapter of Sisters in Crime. She is a very busy lady. She has written romantic suspense. She has written cozies. She has written children's literature. And she's going to talk about writing series and what's different about writing for young adults, and just about plotting and putting together stories in general. So sit back, enjoy, and as always, stay safe. Welcome to another edition of Author Groupie. I'm here with Marilyn Levinson. She's a former Spanish teacher who writes mysteries, romantic suspense, and novels for young readers. There are such a lot of books she's written. I picked out a few. As Alison Brooks, she writes the Haunted Library mystery series. Death Overdue was the first in the series and was an Agatha nominee for Best Contemporary Novel in 2018. Checked Out for Murder, the fourth in the series, will be released this year. Her Golden Age of Mystery Book Club Mysteries features Professor Lexi Driscoll, leading discussions about Agatha Christie and Josephine Tey novels as she solves the mysteries of various members of her book club. And most of Marilyn's mysteries take place on Long Island, where she lives. Marilyn loves traveling, reading, knitting, doing Sudoku, and visiting with her grandchildren, Olivia and Jack, on FaceTime. She is the founder and past president of the Long Island chapter of Sisters in Crime. So you're a fellow sister. I'm with the New York chapter. Welcome to Author Groupie.
Hi.
Hey, I'm also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying I'm very glad to be here.
Glad to have you. I'm also a Long Island girl. Are you North Shore or South Shore?
I lived on North Shore and now I'm in the middle someplace. I started out as a 1-year-old in Brooklyn, and I've been moving east steadily east continuously. I lived in Jericho. I taught in Roslyn. I went to Great Neck High School, and now I'm in Suffolk County.
Oh, I'll have to check out. I have some friends who were at Great Neck. I was in Upper Brookville.
Oh yeah, that's near Jericho, right?
Yeah, so I knew I had some friends who were at Jericho. So interesting. Getting back to books. I know you write a lot of genres. Of all the genres you write, which is your favorite and why?
Well, I started writing children's books because I guess my kids were little and it just seemed great. And a very dear friend of mine, a writer, said that she felt I had a knack for writing children's books, and I still like to write them. But I think I like mysteries the best.
Why?
I love that element of mystery. I love to write. My main interest are my characters, and I love writing series because you can really spend a lot of time with your characters and develop them. And I do this in the Haunted Library series. In one book, there's a great deal about Carrie's her father, and another book about her mother. And neither parent, her parents are divorced, but neither parent lives in the same town as she does. But she has different relationships with them, and her relationships with them change a great deal. And Carrie changes a great deal as the series progresses. And that's really what I love to write the most. And I like writing the mystery, of course, having different victims, having suspects and red ideas and all kinds of things being thrown in. And I'm always happy when people say they can't figure out they think it was one murderer, but it wasn't another. So it's nice to know that I'm able to do that.
Wonderful. So a lot of writers have a fear of writing in different genres. They fear that their fans will be confused or their agents won't want to work that way. What's been your experience?
Well, I started writing children's books, and that's what I did. And I still have one I have to finish. It's part of a trilogy as I see it. Rufus and Magic Run Amok was the first one. It was a children's choice, which is a very nice honor. And then I wrote the second, and the publisher as it was about to be published, died. And the third one I plan to finish in between sometime when I find the time. So I do enjoy writing that, but I really like the mysteries the best because I find they're more complicated. They keep getting more and more complicated. So that is my favorite.
Why did you choose to write under a name for the Haunted Library Mysteries?
Well, I didn't choose that. My publisher did. I had to make a decision about whether or not I wanted a pseudonym when I started writing adult novels. And I decided, no, I'm going to keep my own name. But my publisher at the time wanted me to get a pseudonym. And so Alison Brooke was born. And, but everyone knows that Allison is me. I have the same, I only have one website, one Facebook page. And I don't separate myself. So it really doesn't matter.
Do you think the publisher wanted that so that it would be less confusion because you'd also written children's books, that you have a different identity as this author of this genre?
No, I think it's because it's sales. I think they're concerned. At the time, I really was not doing very much about promoting my books. So I guess my Amazon numbers were not that great. And I think they always have to deal with the salespeople. And if your numbers, they were always looking at your last books, and if your numbers were not outstanding, they're concerned because they want to make money. And so Alison Brooke is a new person, you see. So that is, but pseudonyms are open secrets, as I say. People know who these people are, really, especially amongst the cozy writers.
Sure. So tell me about the appeal of writing cozies.
Well, as I said, it's just, the appeal, I think, is the series. You can keep so many of your characters and the relationships develop and grow. And cozies, you feel cozy as you're writing it. For example, I'm in the middle of the 5th book of the Haunted Library series, and Allison and Carrie is having a phone call with her father, and he's catching up, and he's surprising her every which way because he has a new girlfriend. And he also is he's in business in a way with her boyfriend, and she just throws her many different ways. He's just surprising her many different ways. And she's had to learn how to relate to her father again because he was out of her life a great deal of the time that she was growing up. And he appears in different books, and it's just fun. So that is what I enjoy, you know, the relationships of the books. She lives in a small town where people know each other. The original town was built around a green in Connecticut. It's called Clover Ridge, but I actually based it on a real town. And, but of course I made it up. And she works in a library, and the library is so much fun because, you know, she knows the patrons, and there is the ghost. I often have ghosts or witches. They just appeal to me. Evelyn Havers used to work in the library, and sometimes she helps Carrie solve mysteries, and sometimes she doesn't, because sometimes her relatives are involved in the mysteries, and Evelyn does not want to make them look bad. Very often they do look bad, but she doesn't want to say bad things about her relatives, so she holds back information that she should be sharing. Also, Carrie has she finds a stray cat that jumps into her car, and she ends up taking her to work. And this is Smokey Joe, and he's a gray cat with a bushy tail, and he becomes the library cat. So there are a lot of different elements that's fun about this series that I enjoy writing. She has a great aunt and uncle. They're the people who really nurtured her when she came, as she was very lost when she came to town, and they really took care of her and took her in. So there are all these different characters, you know, that I love and my readers seem to love. And so they continue, and then I create more characters because you don't want to kill everyone off as in the book. So it goes.
So interesting. Is it unusual to have paranormal elements in a cozy? Since you did mention the ghost?
Well, no, there are some cozies that have paranormal elements. I've seen some with there's a witch in who is the main character, or the cat has magical abilities. There are many different ways to go. It's sort of, I guess you could call it a sub genre of cozy. There are some.
I didn't know that. Interesting. So you said earlier that you love to delve into your characters and their pasts and their secrets and their relationships. Does that involve a lot of outlining, especially when you're writing a series?
That's very interesting. I think some of this work goes on unconsciously, because very often I'll present something in one book and then it reappears in another book. The basis was already set in the book, and this just seems to keep happening. So I don't know. I do plot, but no matter how much you plot, you cannot account for everything. And in fact, I was just going to blog about this, because I think, for me, the most difficult part is transitions, getting from one. I'm talking about action scenes or a murder or something important, how to get from one to the other. You can't just jump, and you have to fill in with, what the sleuth does during the day. In my case, she works in the library. She's in charge of events and programs. But because I have all these other characters, it lends itself, and things grow out of it. So I don't know. I think it's like planting seeds. Once you have all these characters, they take on their own lives. For example, her best friend just got married, and there was a murder at the wedding, and things just seem to grow out of other things. It's constantly arising.
Yeah. So I understand that in Checked Out for Murder, you focus on two very different sets of parent-child relationships. Would you like to expound on that a little?
Well, one, I'm trying to think what the second one was. Well, one is a girl who appears, and she grows out of she was a child in an abusive situation. And this involves an old murder and a current murder, actually two current murders. And there is some resolution there. And are you speaking about Carrie's own relationship with her mother?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Carrie's mother comes to town. Why? Because her husband, he's like 12 years younger than her, is an actor. Now he's an actor. And he's going to be in a movie that is being made in Clover Ridge. And Carrie is not very happy about this, because she doesn't get along with her mother. For one thing, her mother's not maternal. Her mother's very manipulative. And if she says something, her mother makes the worst of it. And the bad thing is, her mother is coming to town a week early, so that her husband can practice his lines in the locale where they'll be filming. And what happens is that it turns out that the actress playing opposite Tom, her mother's husband, is his old fiance, and she has an agenda, and her mother gets very, very upset about this. And Carrie and her mother, Carrie ends up letting her mother stay with her, which she's really nervous about. And it's really only for a very short time, and there's some understanding. But in the end, there's not that much that's different, and she has to understand that this is her mother's limitation. Where with her father, it's very different, which is in the second book, Red and Gone. Her father comes to town, and that's a whole other story. Very, very different type of person. And even though he was a thief, and it's rather difficult for her to, but that didn't bother her as much as the fact that he left her. He would, even if he wasn't in jail, he would leave her because she always loved him, and they really had a warm relationship, except that he wasn't there. So it was very hard for her to let him back into her life. So how she deals, how it turns out, like in life, it's one relationship is better than the other.
Which is true in life as well. You know, I'm like you, I write mysteries, and I've toyed around with writing some children's books. You know, what's different about writing for young readers? How do you know what's going to appeal to them, and how do you put your mindset into, you know, yourself into the mindset of a 6-year-old, or does hanging out with your grandchildren help that?
Well, I think I started writing because I started writing children's books because this was when my 2 sons were young, and the very first book I ever wrote, which was never published, and that had a magic element too, come to think of it. It's interesting. Yeah, 2 ghost children. And but the third novel I ever wrote, and Don't Bring Jeremy. In fact, that had 6 state awards. It was up a nominee for 6 state awards, and it got a lot of acclaim.
Wow.
It was really based on my 2 sons. And you know, I wrote about different things. I think I just put myself in my I imagined myself as a child, or I remembered myself as a child. The 4th Grade 4, which is a terrible title, it was about a little boy who couldn't see well. That was me. And he wouldn't wear glasses. So it was all the bad things that happened to him that day in school because, you know, he wasn't really seeing it. And part of the reason he didn't want to get glasses was because one of his friends was kind of a bully, and he knew he would taunt him if he did that. But Rufus and Magic Run Amok, I love this book. It's a very light book about a boy who finds out he's a witch. I wrote this before Harry Potter.
Uh-huh.
It came out after. But it's not like Harry Potter. It's about Rufus comes from a family of witches, but they're do-gooders. His mother and his aunt and his grandmother. And he finds that he can do magic, and he doesn't want to tell them because they're going to make him take lessons. So magic gets out of hand. But see, what I was saying about before, that I intuitively put something in the first book, and then in this book, he learns that his father had a brother who was a witch as well, but he was bad, and he did really bad things. And I bring him in the 3rd book. And there is where he comes and he wants Rufus to be his heir apparent. And he, Rufus at this point is bored. They have a Sandham party, which is rather, boring. These are all do-gooders, and he wants to have some fun. And his uncle does all kinds of weird things and takes him, he shows him where he lives. He has a miniature zoo. And he's very tempted. It's good versus evil. And this is what it's about. And I put that plant there in the first book, never knowing that it would really lead to anything. But I think we do that. Do you find that you ever do that?
I find that I have a vague idea of where the book is going. I know who's done it at the beginning, although things change. In my first book, I knew who did the crime, and then I read a book by Chevy Stevens, which was about a real estate, something happening to a real estate agent, and she was using the same killer, and I had to switch over to a different, and it turned out to be a better decision. So yeah, things evolve.
Yeah. Well, I meant where you plant something, you set something, maybe a relative or something, and then you would use that person or that situation further on, as the series.
Well, sometimes I haven't written series, but in a book itself, I might decide on a plot point and then go back and seed that element early so that it occurs later. Yeah, it usually happens that it's an afterthought. I read it and I thought it needs something else, and I'll go back and seed throughout.
I see.
Yeah.
But I find sometimes I've put the seed, and I like, for example, this evil uncle. I wasn't planning on writing a series, and then 2 books later, 3 books later, it's an important part. So somehow that happens. But I like writing children's books. They're a lot of fun. But what's very difficult to write? Picture books. I really can't write they're very, very difficult to write. Everyone thinks they're easy, but I am more into narratives. So my books are storybooks,
So what age group is right for your
middle grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 8th, 4th and 5th grade, right? Yeah. About that. And then one book I love is called Getting Back to Normal. It's about a girl. There's a ghost in that one. It's about a girl whose mother has died, and her father he was very dependent on her, and they live in an arboretum where her father works, and there's a ghost in it. And her mother's best friend, her family owned this property of the arboretum and has an apartment there. And she gets very upset when her father starts to lean on Maida. And you find out that the ghost is Maida's grandfather. He's very young because he died when he was very young, when he was 23. And he wants the couple to be together. And, she was always fond of Maida, but she sees her as with her father now, so she has to change her thoughts about it. All she wants is to get back to normal. Her mother has died, and it's had a bad effect on her and her brother. And I don't know, I just like writing both, so to speak. And then I've written 1 or 2 romantic suspense, and they're difficult because supposedly you're supposed to keep the couple together a large part of the time. And to me, my romantic suspense is very much a mystery as well, as much as a romance. Yeah
Understood. Was the other book based on the Oyster Bay Arboretum?
Oh, Planting Fields. How did you know?
I grew up there. That was very close to where I grew up.
That's very funny. Yeah. Oh, and it's funny, in this new book that's out, Checked Out for Murder, I have a restaurant. This series takes place, Clover Ridge is in Connecticut, and but they, at one point, Carrie and her boyfriend Dylan, they go to Long Island, and I put in a restaurant that I have gone to many times. I don't name the restaurant, but they passed it. And recently,
what town is it in?
It's in where it's I'm trying to think where it's not far from me in Holbrook. It could be Holtsville. I'm not sure if it's Holtsville or it's on Route 112.
Okay.
112, yeah. But so somebody reviewed it, and he's from Long Island. I asked him, I said, "Do you know which restaurant I'm talking about?" But he didn't live in that particular area. I think if you lived in that particular area, like you knew Planting Fields, that's exactly, he moves his daughter and her brother into one of those houses, the brick is like almost purple, those little dinky little cottages that are still on the property. Yeah.
Yeah. So. There was a restaurant that was not so far from the Planting Fields over in Locust Valley that I thought you were going to say that when my father was living in Locust Valley, we'd go there. Every time I came to visit, we'd eat at this one restaurant, which is a wonderful restaurant. And I miss it now that he's moved down to Florida.
Oh, that is funny.
Yeah,
so where did you grow up?
I grew up in Upper Brookville, and I went to Greenvale, and then I went to Friends Academy.
Oh, yes, Friends Academy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a North Shore girl. So I've
Yeah.
got one last question, and that is, I know that you were saying how much you like writing crime fiction, and I know one of your favorite parts is tying old murder cases and creating new ones. Did you want to elaborate on that?
Well, yeah, well, first of all, I love to always have secrets, and secrets usually imply something that happened in the past. So I know as a reader, I'm always intrigued by secrets. So I find it's very interesting. In Checked Out for Murder, the two murders that happen as the book moves along, they are connected to a past murder. And it was hard for me to get it all together so that it worked. And in Death Overdue, the first book in this series, it opens where a retired police lieutenant, says he knows really what happened with when somebody had been murdered 14, 15 years ago previously in Clover Ridge. And he said he now knows who did it. And he's talking at the library, and he is eating, the cookies. They serve you cookies and drinking coffee, and he keels over and he dies. So, there is this murder that they're trying to solve. And then, of course, there's another murder, because one murder is not quite enough. So I do like when I can tie something in the past to the present. I think it's more intriguing.
But did it have to be the cookies?
Uh,
I like the cookies.
I know. Well,
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, a fellow sister in crime. I wish, when the book comes out, when, the new book?
September 8th.
September 8th, and it's on pre-order now, right?
Oh, yes.
So people who are listening and watching, please go out and pick that up. If you look under Marilyn Levinson, go to her website, you're going to see a lot of other books you can choose from. Buy them all.
Well, thank you.
And it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I hope that everything goes well, and please stay safe.
Thank you. You too. And thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Over the river to the city far from home. Toll booth takes my money.